So good afternoon. Very excited about our webinar this afternoon, where we're going to be focusing on best practices for social skills. We'll be talking about extended school year programming and best practices related to that. And I'll be providing an overview of our High Step Social Skills Summer Program. Throughout the webinar, which goes from 12 until 1 o'clock, you're going to be seeing the slide presentation, and there'll be a video toward the end. And I'll also be available to stay until about 1:15 for additional questions that may come through. In terms of some of the housekeeping, which I'll repeat a couple times, there should be an option on your computer where you can chat, where you can provide a question or comment, and I'll do my best to try to address as many of those as we can as I go throughout our webinar. So I'm really pleased that you're joining us this afternoon and looking forward to sharing information. A little bit about my background and our practice. So my name is Michael Selbst. I'm a licensed psychologist as well as a certified school psychologist and a BCBA at the doctoral level. I serve as co-owner of Behavior Therapy Associates and the director of the practice. My colleague Steve Gordon founded our practice back in 1979, so we're proud to be celebrating 40 years. And our High Step program has been in existence for 20 years. And in our practice, we have psychologists and BCBAs, and we provide an array of services that includes individual therapy, group therapy, social skills programming, behavioral parent training, school-based consultation, as well as evaluations and trainings and seminars to parents as well as staff, in addition to our summer program. We work with children through adults, and in my practice, probably about 50-50 in terms of children and adolescents compared to adults. So we're going to get started, and we're going to really provide a nice overview of what are some of the key components that are most important for effective social skills programming. So I'll stay in part of the screen here, as you'll be able to see. And we'll also make the presentation available to everybody following the recording so that you can review that if you'd like. Additionally, for those who are going to be present throughout the webinar, I'll be sure to send off a certificate indicating your participation in the seminar so that you can use that if you're an educator for an hour of continuing education participation as an educator. So look forward to this afternoon. So as it's entitled, High Step Summer Social Skills Programming, Fun, Learning, and Evidence-Based. Our name, High Step, helping improve social skills through evidence-based practices, really want to emphasize that the importance of whatever it is that we're doing needs to be research-based and sound. So the strategies that we utilize in our psychology practice, as we do in any of the behavioral work that we do, as well as in social skills programming, is based upon best practices and what research is driving us. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then, as I said, get into the video toward the end. So the problem, regardless of whether you're participating as an educator, a parent, a mental health professional, or in some other role, I'm sure we all have experience where we work with children who could be in various situations, whether they're in the classroom or on the playground. And the challenges for many children is that they are intending and wanting to play with others, although we certainly know that there are many who are not as intent and not desiring social skills interactions, which could be as a consequence of weaknesses in social skills, or perhaps they just don't seem to have an interest. But for those children that really are struggling, it's often because there's a skill deficit. And that child, for example, Bobby in this screen, is struggling. He wants to play with somebody, but doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know how to initiate that interaction. And it could result in some poor self-control, and could be that he's shy or lacking a self-awareness and self-esteem. Could be because there are executive functioning deficits related to ADHD symptoms or a learning problem. And regardless of his placement, whether he's in a gen ed classroom or a special education classroom, the challenges exist in that we're trying to and wanting to help a child who is really struggling in those areas of deficit. And we'll talk a little bit about what we can do and what his best practices say that we could do to potentially help that child. The degree to which children really are learning and trying to establish and develop appropriate relationships and behaviors is really what defines a lot of social competence. But it's also this kind of combination the combination of increasing desired behaviors and also to decrease or to modify and manage the challenging, that interplay between the challenging, the social skills, and the interfering or problem behaviors. So in any kind of real solid behavioral plan, any kind of intervention that we have that's going to be helpful potentially for someone, what we really need to do is we need to be able to help them to have replacement behaviors that are going to be functionally equivalent, that are established to improve the deficit area. So if a child is struggling with appropriately managing behavior, it could be that they're engaging in communication with feeling statements and feelings management. If they're struggling with conversation skills, what are good conversation starters? And we commonly see that for children, the anger management and frustration tolerance is that they have a lot of difficulty even being aware of what their thoughts are and communicating that, rather than being more mindful of establishing and communicating what their words are and being able to problem solve and work through the situation. So having ability to regulate and be more mindful, of course, is very important. If we were, kind of interacting, sitting in a large room and talking, saying, hey, what are some of your challenges that you're experiencing? We'd probably hear from many people talking about making and keeping friends, or communicating feelings appropriately, self-control, solving problems, and anger management. That we know that the nature of the problem extends beyond just friendship making to the interpersonal interactions and the ability to be able to be more effective in that regard. I mentioned acquisition deficit. So if you imagine learning to play the drums or learning to drive a car for the first time, typically we would describe that as an acquisition deficit, learning to ride a bike or hit a tennis ball or tie shoes. We should operate typically from the assumption, the first point, that a child has not acquired the skills adequately. So if we're now in March, and as an educator or a parent, you're saying, it's March, you should know by now how to come into the classroom. You should know how to get ready for school. As soon as you're noticing that you're saying someone should be able to do that and they're not doing it, should be a pretty good indication that probably there's an acquisition deficit. When there's an acquisition deficit, then our mind should be moving to, I need to be working on skill acquisition and helping that child through teaching, breaking down, repetition, role play, really planned practice like we would do with any academic deficit or any sports deficit, so that we can increase that skill. However, we also know that even when a child has the ability to perform a skill or to display a skill, like raise their hand and wait to be called upon, or to initiate a comment or question, they may not be performing it. And that may be related to a weakness in their ability to be motivated. They may not care. And that's when we talk about function of behavior, that performing that skill means that someone is intent on doing it and motivating to do it, even when they're experiencing some frustration or difficulty or anxiety. So we need to, when we look at acquisition of skills, we also want to help with reinforcing the skills by identifying what is going to be meaningful to that child, what's going to be kind of the hook to bring them in, and then gradually fading from more tangible reinforcers to social praise and helping the child to see the benefit of it on their own. But performance, we know, is certainly a challenge. Generalization is another really important piece. We hear from many families that it's wonderful that my child is displaying the desired social skills in the social skills group. But for me, the litmus test or the barometer is, does my child have any friends? Is my child invited over for a play date? Is my child invited to a birthday party, or who would they invite to a birthday party? So the essence of generalization is that we need to be teaching kids in an environment where they can practice. And we can't really emphasize that enough, that engaging a lot of behavioral rehearsal, practice, role play, so that we can take the desired skill and see that move to other situations that are going to be functional and meaningful. That also means that we need to have adults in that situation, ideally, that have knowledge, experience, and some training in what it is that we're doing. So if we're providing social skills training in the school, if we're providing it in a private setting, we want to be able to communicate to those adults that will be present on the playground, in the cafeteria, in the classroom, so that we can foster greater success. And ideally, we want to also be present in those situations to be coaching other kids so that that child can be successful, so we can foster greater generalization. Fluency refers to speed and accuracy. So if you're learning to dribble a basketball, it might look like this kind of very slowly, but as the fluency increases, whether it's driving a car, dribbling a basketball, or tying shoes, or learning to read, then it becomes much more automatic. So with social skills, it's kind of the same way, that a child begins with very rote and slow, like, what's your name? Do you like to play an instrument? Do you like to play an instrument? Do you like to play an instrument? There isn't the flexibility yet and the fluency where the child is able to more consistently and more confidently and comfortably communicate, wait for a response, and then continue with that conversation, because it could be very challenging for them. But through, again, lots of practice and feedback, we can help them. Which segues into this next slide, that we want to train students to become better observational learners. It's why eye contact is important. It's why awareness and mindfulness of the situation becomes so important. And through that practice and that awareness and that feedback, we help children to be in a much better position to take that skill, acquire it, and to transfer to various different situations. Preparing for novel situations is also very important, because we want to be able to help them move through that environment to experience a new environment. And what we often see is that many children with poor social skills have a notable amount of anxiety. And when they're experiencing anxiety, we know that many individuals will escape. They'll move away, they'll avoid a situation. And we see that in various social situations, that moving away from that which you experience as uncomfortable, or where you anticipate it will be uncomfortable, is sort of someone's MO. If we can provide them with more and more novel situations so that they can experience actually that discomfort, they become more comfortable with that discomfort. And that's critical with any kind of situation, to immerse a child gradually in a situation with tools and giving them feedback so that they can improve upon that and know what they're doing well as where they're having some difficulty. Monitoring how they're doing and allowing for some corrective action would also be quite helpful as well. In terms of that practice and that role play, ideally setting aside time as much as possible. So a child who's participating in academic remediation is not usually once a week. And while we do social skills groups in our office, and social skills groups are often done in schools, the data unfortunately are not great for just doing a social skills group with nothing else. It's a little bit better than chance, which means we've got to set aside sufficient time, and as we discussed before, generalization, so that we can take that skill and carry that over to multiple different situations. So planning for, even if it's a check-in every morning when the child arrives, of let's review that skill. Maybe we have a social narrative that might be helpful. Let's have some planned practice to prime the child just before lunchtime. Prime them just before we're going to be doing some group activity, so that they're more likely to utilize that replacement skill. The idea of discrete skills, which is common in most social situations. Today, we're going to work on handling teasing. Tomorrow, we're going to work on greetings. The next day, we're going to work on appropriate voice tone, or asking for help or accepting help. That has a lot of merit, because we do want to take a skill, a discrete skill, and break it down into its specific steps so that we can be more successful. However, the challenge is that it doesn't allow us to get into providing the child with sufficient skills that they can tackle new situations. So whatever skills you're targeting in social skills training, we want to ensure that we're also focusing on kind of the larger umbrella of systematically promoting problem solving. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So if you imagine you've got an 8-year-old child who just gets off the school bus, and every other day he or she is meeting a parent or meeting a babysitter, and for whatever reason today, doors are locked, no one's home, and they don't have a key. In my experience, in most situations, we haven't necessarily taught that skill of what to do when I arrive home 4 o'clock, 3:30, and nobody's there. And the reality is we can't cover every skill, What we can do is that we can provide this broader kind of alternative approach. And to be clear, this is not an alternative where we're giving up teaching discrete skills. By all means, we do want to teach all of those skills that we're talking about. But in addition, alternatively, we want to make sure that we're including emphasis on social problem solving. Social problem solving is really critical so that when we think about the idea of independence, that we want to gradually fade out the adult and allow that child to have greater insight and awareness about how to problem solve in a particular situation. So what you can do is, if you think about that adage, if you give a person a fish, of course, they're going to eat for a day. But if you teach them to fish, they eat for a lifetime. So in good social skills programming, it should incorporate social problem solving, where we're providing the child with necessary skills to be able to independently have this proverbial toolbox that they can take with them to problem solve. So as you're sitting there and you're listening to me, think about problems that you experience. And while I can't respond to all the chats as I see, I know that some people have been struggling and maybe still are struggling with connecting, to the webinar. And I apologize for that. And looks like some people are trying to help out some other people. But we at least know, okay, there's a problem and I'm going to try to do something to solve that. It's like if you're driving and you may not be an auto mechanic or an expert in auto repair, but if you know that your car has stopped moving along the highway, you're probably thinking, hey, there's a problem here. I'm driving my car and it stopped. And I'm feeling concerned. I'm worried. I'm anxious. I'm scared. I've got all of these different emotions and they're pretty strong. And my main goal is safety, right? Maybe you've given up on my main goal is to get to that concert or that sporting event. I need to get safe. So you're kind of now hyper-focused. You've got that toolbox, not because you Googled how to handle when your car is stuck on the highway, but because you have enough experience with problem solving that you hone in on what's most important. And then you're going to start to think of the variety of different solutions that exist for you to be safe. And then once you're safe, perhaps we think about how to get to our destination. But we focus on safety and sort of scroll through what are the ideal ways to get safe. Well, I need to pull off to the side of the road if possible, or at least get my body to the side of the road, call someone, put on my hazard lights if I can, put out a red cone, orange cone. So we stay focused with that because we know how to problem solve. But the problem is, for many individuals that have poor social skills, they're not adept at problem solving. So what I want to share briefly is an example of social problem solving. And to be clear, while I'm going to talk a little bit about our curriculum, please know that there are an infinite number, well, maybe not an infinite, but there are many, many ways to teach social problem solving. The key is that you want to have a systematic approach that teaches that as a skill, just like we would teach someone how to greet somebody, how to initiate a conversation, or how to tie their shoe. We can teach how to problem solve. So my colleague, Dr. Gordon, Steve Gordon, and myself developed Power Solving as a social problem solving curriculum that we've been utilizing in our summer program, and we can use as part of consultation in many different settings, as well as right in our office. And I'll expand on that as well. So Power Solving, and if you're interested in learning more about it, you can just Google Power Solving, and we have a website, power-solving.com. But the main components of that, which are consistent with strategies that are going to promote any kind of skill, is that it needs to be structured, systematic, user-friendly, with a clear plan. So we use what's called the 3D model, which is not anything novel. Really what that stands for is that we're going to discuss the skill, we're going to demonstrate or show that skill, and we're going to break down the specific steps, and then we're going to do it, meaning we're going to have the child do it. We're going to have the child take step by step by step, more specifically, how they can go through each of those steps to problem solve. So effectively, power solving or problem solving is to systematically go through the steps of problem solving. And we monitor how someone does. So I'll take you through those steps in just a moment. In addition to our practice, We have many public and private schools that are also using power solving. At this point, we have more than 27 states that are using it, and in 8 countries, as you see below, which is wonderful as we're trying to spread the word internationally about power solving. But at its core, here is what power stands for. And think about this, how this may relate to your own situation, whether you were able to effectively, get on the webinar. And as I see, in covering for myself is my assistant, Brian Maya, who's our marketing expert. So it looks like he's tried to help out some people here, and hopefully he's been able to. And that would be part of our solutions here, right on the spot. But power solving, the first step is to put the problem into words. I was going to get a drink and then someone cut me in line. I was going to school and then I was late for the bus. I was leaving for work and then I couldn't find my keys. I was taking my child to flute practice and my child couldn't find their flute. So one of the areas that kids struggle with is they kind of shrug their shoulders instead of putting a problem into words. So we help them and train them and break it down through the curriculum very specifically of here's how you put a problem into words. And we're going to practice that and practice that and practice that. And then we're going to get to the next step, which is observe and measure your feelings. And we're going to teach them not only to notice and communicate their feelings, so there's a bit of mindfulness connected with that, but also to measure your feelings. Because breaking your pencil or spilling some water shouldn't be a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 compared to running and you're chasing after something that's really important to you. You've just made something for your parents and you've fallen and you've cut open your knee and now you can't move. Well, that should be a 10. But spilling water or breaking your pencil point should be like a 1 or a 2. And we know that a lot of children struggle with regulating emotions and managing emotions because they see everything as a 10. That's that proverbial going from 0 to 100 or 0 to 60. Helping the child then to work out your goal, really identifying the goal, and not just what is my goal, but how much do I want to reach it? So we know that many children may say, I want to have a friend, or I want to be able to watch TV, or I want to be able to get this or do that. But the willingness often isn't there. They're not willing to put forth the effort and the sustained effort of either learning or experiencing some of that discomfort. And hopefully as adults, you can relate to that as well, that if it's something you really want, then you need to put forth not just effort, but be willing to experience that discomfort. That's what happens with a lot of New Year's resolutions. So if you yourself or others have a New Year's resolution and they don't stick to it or didn't start it, it's not because the goal wasn't valued or that they didn't care about that goal or wasn't meaningful. It's were they willing to persist and keep moving forward with that even when they were experiencing some discomfort. And we find that many children struggle with that, whether it's individually or in social interactions. Next, we get into exploring solutions. So what are the different solutions that we could do? How could I manage that? What are the different options? Will it work? Will it reach my goal? Is it safe? How will people feel? Is it fair? And by the way, many children seem to struggle with is it fair? Because if I don't like it, well, then it's not fair. And we hear that a lot. Oh, it's not fair. Well, I think what you mean is that you don't really like that solution, or you don't like that it didn't work out for you. But we help them to evaluate solutions and choose the best one that's going to be sort of all yeses to those critical questions, and then put that in place. And then we get to the R, let's review your plan. Did it work? Let's reward yourself. Great job. So the curriculum, in terms of the detail, which we won't get into today, there's a facilitator guide, much like you would have in an academic area. There's a student workbook with lots of pictures and very brief fill-in responses that the facilitator can help them with. But the essence, the guts of it is right what you see in terms of those steps. What we do with the curriculum is we're taking the kids through lots of different role play situations, as well as experiences that they have in their home situation, in the community, and at school. So we call them real life experiments so they can practice. Additionally, we have a variety of different activities that we send home that are already prepared for parents to practice and review. And we emphasize to parents when their child is involved in the power solving curriculum that they need to be involved with that process. We see a significant increase, and that's what research tells us, when a child is completing the homework with the parent assistance. So there's a lot of support for utilizing that. So as I mentioned, we have situations that look at a school situation, a community-related situation, and a home situation. And any good social skills programming that you can do, or that you do, needs to incorporate a variety of different exemplars so that the generalization is more likely to occur. If you're only practicing in that small group and just talking about what to do, that's a lot different than role play where the child can experience. Also giving them feedback, giving them the opportunity to monitor how they're progressing and to get some immediate feedback about how it went. And you can see from this slide, gosh, there's a lot of steps involved in playing a game, just like there are a lot of steps involved with greeting someone or staying calm. And to do so involves a lot. And it's pretty, sort of mindful for people to notice when somebody's not doing a good job. Even subtleties of eye contact and subtleties of our body language become real clear to someone. So shaping that with what you see here, 8, 9, 10 steps to playing a game, we need to take some time, give the child some systematic feedback about the success or frustration or difficulties that they're experiencing. So in terms of summarizing best practices, we need to have a systematic approach. That is, that we're breaking down skills into their component parts, step by step, discussing and modeling that, which is really critical, going through them, teaching step by step, and then having the child practice that. We need to have this overarching kind of umbrella skill of teaching kids how to problem solve, because then they have that toolbox that they can potentially bring to a variety of situations that are novel that they haven't necessarily ever experienced. Otherwise, what they're experiencing internally, it's like they're on a stage with hundreds of kids in front of them, or it's bottom of the ninth inning in a baseball game, 2 outs, bases loaded, and the game depends upon you. And they feel this overwhelming degree of anxiety because I don't know what to do. Everybody's looking at me, and success is so critical and failure would be so terrible. And really what we want to do is to have that child have multiple experiences where it doesn't necessarily go well. In fact, we want to have experiences where it didn't go well so the child can see that they experienced that with success rather than avoiding that through tantrum behavior, aggressive behavior, leaving the situation, showing shyness or some other behavior. So we can help them through that practice. Monitoring their progress, of course, is very critical, and giving that feedback. It's one thing to have data stacked up. It's another thing to actually monitor that progress and provide some good, solid feedback. As I mentioned also, if we're doing social skills training, whether it's once a week or twice a week, we're going to have much greater success if we can have check-ins more frequently and preparing the child for the situation. And training to fluency, training them throughout the year, not just having social skills programming beginning in October and ending in April because that's when staff are available. We wouldn't do that with any academic subject. We wouldn't take a child that has a significant learning disability in reading and say, we'll start in October and do that once a week for 30 minutes and kind of hope and pray that it's going to generalize, and then we'll end in March or April, or we'll stop when there's standardized testing. Social emotional learning, social skills, problem solving is critical, and that requires sustained interventions and then systematically and gradually fading where appropriate. And for many students, as you probably know, it's lifelong. So when we were talking about the steps involved in power solving, these are skills that are not easy for many, many children and many adults. Listening to it, you probably were thinking, other adults that struggle with problem solving and exploring solutions and choosing the best strategy and thinking of a goal and sticking to it, because this is human nature. It is challenging. So for children that have social skills deficits, increasingly more challenging. And again, generalization plan is important. The more you can coach and monitor, the better. The more you can be speaking the same language across settings, the better. So whether it's relatives that are going to be helping out with a child outside of school, or whether it's multiple different staff members within the school, ideally you're using the same language, whether that's power solving and the steps of power, or whether it is another kind of prompt or cue or acronym that's going to help to focus kids, to have them know what are the skills to help me to regulate, to help me to effectively problem solve and manage what it is that I'm doing. Visual cues can go a long way toward leading to and resulting in some success. When we're talking about fading and systematically trying to fade, be very mindful of what you tell kids. And in terms of avoiding or minimizing prompt dependency, what we often find is that the adult is telling the child what to do. You need to take your shoes off. You need to get this from your locker. Take out your book bag, sharpen your pencil, stay quiet. There's a famous psychologist, Donald Meichenbaum, who says that we probably tell children about 200 or 300 directions or commands on a daily basis. And that often results in the feeling of coercion and the child feeling controlled and pushing back, which is why we see a lot of oppositional behavior, and the child not really internalizing it. We want to get to that point of kind of that fluency where they're leaving, they're getting ready for school, just like hopefully, all of you listening, that you're thinking, okay, all right, I need my watch, I need my wallet, I need my keys, I need my phone. All right, I'm ready to go. So that self-talk, Socratic approach can get us there. Asking the child, what do you think you need to do? What should you do if you're having difficulty? What is the thing to do when somebody is speaking, instead of saying, stop, you need to interrupt more politely, or please sit nicely. So we want to kind of move it along where the child is thinking about what they need to do versus telling them. This next slide just kind of highlights that there's some really good social skills materials that exist, some examples of some websites that have a variety of social skills games and books and resources that would be helpful. Video modeling is also a really good evidence-based strategy that has had increasingly more research support through the years as an evidence-based strategy for individuals with autism, individuals working on social skills in general. So just very fond of utilizing video modeling toward success of developing skills. So let's link this and talk a little bit about extended school year programming. And I'll go through this fairly quickly because many of you may be familiar with, and if not, you can certainly review the slides or read on the internet. But I just wanted to give some brief information that ESY, or extended school year programming, refers to those special education and related services that a student who has a disability, who has been found eligible for special education services, that they may receive during the time beyond the normal school year. And that programming, of course, needs to be provided consistent with the IEP. And who determines whether the child is eligible for ESY programming? That would be the IEP team, which includes the school personnel and the parent at the very least. And whatever programming is provided should always be aligned with best practices. There are a lot of sort of questions that the team should be considering when they're exploring that, such as, has the child mastered the skills? Because maybe the child wasn't receiving appropriate programming through the years, throughout the school year. Maybe they weren't receiving any social emotional learning throughout the year. Maybe they weren't receiving the appropriate academic instruction. Maybe they haven't generalized. Maybe they've learned it and can display it in a small group, in a resource center or in a social skills group, but haven't generalized to other situations. So that could mean that the child needs some additional support to address, so that not only are we concerned about regression is where we expect that children will regress and lose skills during the summer, and that it takes a reasonable time for them to recoup skills. And that's expected. But when it's expected that it's going to be a significantly greater amount of regression and or recoupment, then we're concerned about that. And that's often where ESY programming is warranted. But the team could also have a discussion about whether the child has even acquired skills that were included as part of their goals and objectives. And if the child hasn't acquired skills, then we may be talking about, besides regression and recoupment, what do we do for a child that hasn't even come close to a number of goals and objectives, and whether that's a good talking point for consideration of ESY. So if the team believes that there are some significant deficits that have not improved, and or concerned about the child showing significant regression and long time to recoup, that could be, again, a reason to be considering ESY. And if we're talking about social emotional learning and social skills specifically, the success of any ESY programming really requires careful blend of using evidence-based practices, good collaboration and teamwork, and being able to communicate back to the team what it is that that you're doing during the summer. So now it's a good time. I'm going to segue a little bit to talk about our High Step program. And High Step, as I mentioned before, stands for Helping Improve Social Skills Through Evidence-Based Practices. So we're proud to be celebrating 20 years. My colleague Steve Gordon, pictured there with me. We have 3 locations. Our northern location is in Scotch Plains, and that's directed by Rory Panter, who's been doing that since the inception of the Scotch Plains location. And Rebecca Schulman is our director at the Pennington location, and Stephanie Quigley at our Marlton or Evesham location. All 3 of our directors have years of experience familiar with our High Step program and years of experience in terms of teaching social skills, programming, and leading others. So it's wonderful that they have that expertise to lead our staff. So what is High Step? It's a 5-week day program. And as my colleague Steve Gordon likes to say affectionately, we're bathing kids in social skills. However, it doesn't always feel that way to the kids, which is good. It's really an immersion in direct instruction of social problem solving and social emotional learning, together with infusing a lot of fun. So we have recreational and sports activities. We have creative arts activities. We have learning centers, which is not direct academic instruction, but has academic themes throughout the week where we're having kids working together toward that common theme so that they can successfully collaborate, communicate, show good emotional regulation and frustration tolerance and sharing and turn taking and waiting and initiating so that they can be successful in that learning activity. And toward that end, we're providing that combination again of direct instruction and infusing social skills with fun throughout the week. And that way, of course, kids are more engaged. So we began our program in 2000, initially called Stepping Stone, and then we renamed it High Step in 2008 when we developed our second location to the northern Jersey area. And while we initially began as a 10-day program and then grew to a 6-week program, and then we backed off to 5 weeks, that seemed to be more manageable in terms of time that districts were seeking and that parents were looking for during the summer. Although that being said, I know that many parents would like it to be 10 weeks or 8 weeks during the summer, but we've kind of settled into a 5-week program. And it operates from 8:45 to 2:45 on a daily basis throughout those 5 weeks. We have provided High Step to more than 900 children, more than 900 children throughout the years, and the children generally range from 6 through 17. We've had many children that are older than 17 up through age 21, and we're a little bit more careful about the consideration of the program being appropriate, but we certainly do consider children older than 17. Children turning 6, we will certainly consider, but if a child is younger than 6, we're much more cautious about that because of often the daily living skills the child may need in terms of being toilet trained, which are important to be attending our program, and their ability to understand and process the materials as we go through. So typically we look at ages 6 through 17. We incorporate the power solving curriculum pretty much every day in terms of direct instruction, and we're focusing on that throughout the day. So we've got that mini poster you saw before on power solving. We have that with us. We have large posters throughout the classes. We have them in the hallway, in the cafeteria. So we're continually immersing the kids in the common language of social problem solving to help them through situations. Because, of course, you don't just have your toolbox in a situation that where someone tells you need it. You need to have that with you all the time. So we're trying to really promote that for the children. So it's a data-driven approach. We're collecting data on a daily basis, monitoring how kids are doing, and sending home that scorecard on a daily basis as well, which I'll show you in just a moment. We're incorporating what research guides us in terms of behavior analytic approaches, best practices for teaching social emotional learning, for minimizing challenging behavior, and for really reinforcing desired behaviors. So we do that in a systematic way and a very much a fun, engaging way so that the kids experience that like they would a camp experience. We call it a program to differentiate it from a camp, but I think if you ask the kids, they say, yeah, I'm going to camp today. But again, it's very much focused as a program. We're one of the, kind of the strong points that we see from our inception is the importance of daily communication. So we have a daily summary, not just of how the individual child did, but what are the program tenets that we're focused on, and what are generalization activities that parents can do. So on a daily basis, that goes home so the parent knows how their child did, and they can communicate with their child about what the activities were and their child's participation. We also have staff parent conferences in the beginning and at the end of the program so we can be giving systematic feedback. We offer 2 parent training seminars that focus on how to teach your child social problem solving. So we need to teach parents about power solving and then how they can teach their child. And we also teach parents about how to do limit setting and effective parenting and responsive parenting, how to deliver reinforcement to their child, how to manage challenging behavior, how to promote positive social skills. So that's also included as 2 parent evening seminars where we provide childcare during those seminars for any parent that needs that as well without any charge for that. We provide generalization strategies in terms of power up activities. That at the end of every power solving lesson, as I mentioned, there's a tear out activity that we send home that we want parents and child to work on. Yes, we know it's the summer, and most of those activities are only about 2 or 3 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes, and it's ideally something that they can do together and with siblings that would be fun. We also include a variety of special events, at least on a weekly basis, and we may have therapy dogs or a science show, animal show, reptiles that are brought in, planetarium, musicians we've had professional athletes that have come in and spoken, a fossil dig. We do a family day at the end of the summer where family comes in and we do a presentation and there's some interaction there as well. We have a charity event because we don't just talk about empathy and perspective taking, but we have kids actively engaged in talking about what we can do for others and then working through activities where they may do something for homeless or for armed forces that are overseas, or for other individuals that may have some difficulty, and how could we help them either because of a medical issue or some other kind of experience. So we want the kids to have a greater understanding through doing, but not because an adult said that we need to do something for charity. So they're actively involved in making something or walking and experiencing that where it could be very mindfully helping others. So we effectively coach kids. Our goals are we want to be able to fade those prompts, but coach kids just enough that they can start to internalize those skills and be successful, for that, and to be able to really help them to be able to manage and to work through those skills without as much of that support. Here's kind of the layout if we think about staffing, and to note, we don't always have, as you'll see, 16 kids in each classroom. We have up to 16 children, and when we do, you'll have 6 staff members in that class. So we advertise that the ratio is 4 children to 1 staff member, but typically our ratio is really 2 to 1 throughout the program. So in our locations where we generally have up to about 32 children, some years we've had more, but if we have up to 32 children, we probably have 15 or 16 staff full-time employed at that location. So we always have a program director, an assistant director. We have a lead counselor and an assistant counselor, or 2 co-lead counselors in each classroom. And then within that classroom, we have the children grouped according to, generally grouped first according to their age. So we'll have 6 and 7-year-olds together and overlapping some 7 and 8-year-olds and then 8 and 9 and 9 and 10-year-olds. But we're not going to put a 6-year-old in a group of 4 with a 12-year-old. So we're going to keep them close upon age. And an individual counselor will be sitting with them, working with them in that small group of 3 or 4. Additionally, we have floating counselors, we have sports and recreational specialists and creative specialists, and a nurse that's on site throughout the entire time. And the kids will travel with their class, with their counselors with them. So when they go to a sports activity or creative arts activity, it's unlike what you might see in a school where the whole class goes and now the phys ed teacher is in charge. The whole class goes at high step with the creative or special sports specialist in charge, and all of the staff go, and we might have one staff member that will rotate to take a break, but we're maintaining at least that 4-to-1 ratio, and more commonly a 3-to-1 ratio. Every morning we review the schedule. For some children who need a more visual schedule, we'll have that right there on their desk and help them to be able to navigate the day as they go through. But we take time each morning to review that with them so they understand what that looks like. We also start every morning with a staff training, and we take time to prep our staff in the morning as well as an hour at the end of the day to continually provide training to staff. And to be clear, all of our staff are staff that have experience and knowledge working in social skills. So many of our staff are certified teachers. Many are special education teachers. We sometimes will have psychologists and social workers and counselors and learning consultants that are our staff members, some who may be working as private practitioners. We have grad students in the area of education and psychology and social work and counseling and speech therapy. And we have some undergrads as well who have experience in the field and are pursuing a degree in any of those areas. I should also mention that all of our staff go through the same clearances in terms of fingerprinting and so forth, and child abuse and sexual abuse and criminal activity clearances in order to work through and to work at our program. And we also provide 2 full days of training to all of our staff as well. So getting back to the schedule, we prepare for arrival. The kids arrive at 8:45, and from the time that they arrive every day, we're working on the importance of checking in, communication, and eye contact. So our kind of proverbial, like the password to get in to High Step is greeting. And we gradually increase the demand of a greeting to staff and other kids to begin the day. And then we start off the day, once they're in the program, working on social conversation. We call it social eyes, as kind of a play on the word social and the word eyes. Socialized time, where we're going to really work on fostering and developing the social skills right off the bat in the morning. Then we get into a review of the day. And depending upon the group, the next activity could be a social skills group. Then the next could be getting feedback about their behavior. And we do this after every activity, by the way. We provide feedback about their behavior. We also ask the kids to give us feedback about how they think they did, and then to give feedback to one another, which is a skill we gradually work on. They might have the learning center as the next activity, working on socially relevant themes. And then supervised recreational activity. So the kids will call it recess, but for us, it's active engagement. So it's not okay for the child to just be running around in the playground. They need to stay with someone, play with someone, and talk with someone. And they need to be with another child. So it's not just time to chill and relax. They could do a calmer activity, but they need to be doing it with someone. And our staff are there to be promoting and refining those friendship and play skills while also monitoring how they're doing and then giving them feedback during and after that activity. Same thing with lunch. Our staff are present, we're sitting among the kids and gradually fading where and when appropriate, promoting social interaction and social language, and then gradually again fading as we can throughout the summer, and again giving them feedback. Creative arts, same thing as with sports activities, that we have a direct skill that we're targeting with a backdrop of working on social skills, so sportsmanship and sharing and cooperation. So for example, we have plenty of scissors and plenty of markers and plenty of materials, but we're not going to give every child a pair of scissors. We might put scissors among the 4 kids, and they need to ask for it and make eye contact and use the child's name so that they can be working on patience and turn taking and conversation versus making it easier for them and just giving them materials. So the fun activity is the creative activity, the sports activity, but again, with infusing the social skills. And then we wind down the day with a more child-driven friendship building time where they can invite others and join others in an activity in the building, engaging in some systematic, some fun play with oversight among staff. I should mention that the majority of the day takes place in an air-conditioned elementary school that we're renting out space, and they do go outside for playground time and for some of the sports activities as well. We end the day with a final review, and then they all have a chance to go to the reward store, and they can either exchange their points for prizes, or they could decide, you know what, I don't want to use these. I want to delay that gratification and wait for another day or another week and kind of bank for a larger prize. We give that scorecard every day to the parent, or I should say we put it in the child's bag that goes home to the parent so that they can see how they did. Just scrolling through a couple pictures here. So the daily scorecard, here's a quick example. And if it's a little fuzzy for you to see, that we have the activities listed on the one side, points for participation, points for 2 individual goals that we target, which can be ever changing. We decide those goals based upon feedback from school personnel, if the school district has sent the child, or if we have school records, feedback from the parent, and communicating with the child. So we're working to get toward mastery with those goals, and we also provide bonus points to the child, catching them displaying desired skills throughout the course of the summer. So we're using a lot of visuals, as you can see with some of these next pictures. You see a child here in the middle who's working on the power solving curriculum. We've got a picture of outdoor activities and then staff working on sports skills and parachute time. There's a lot of questions that people commonly ask, so we'll have these up again on our website, and you'll also be able to get a copy of the whole PowerPoint here. So I won't scroll through all of these, but we do cover many different skills throughout High Step. Many of those which are through direct instruction, and many of those are also how we infuse throughout the day. We want parents to be able to support that through giving reinforcement, through asking and checking in with how their child does. By the way, we also make caught being good phone calls on a daily basis. We call parents, spontaneously to say, we just want to let you know your child did a great job doing this or doing that. Parents typically, if somebody's calling them, they get that phone call 10:30 in the morning, they're usually thinking that's not a good thing. But we're trying to change that culture, that we're going to catch your child being good, doing the desired skill, and then deliver that feedback to you. Talked about staff training, and so I'm going to skip some of these because I've covered most of this information about the ratio and the training and the feedback that we give to a child and to a parent, the conferences we have at the end. We utilize strategies like learning my feelings log, helping kids to be able to be more mindful of their thoughts and their feelings and review what happened. There's a strategy called a social autopsy, and the learning my feelings log that you see here is similar to that we're going to talk about what happened, where were you, what was your emotion, and how did you handle yourself. Fostering that generalization, we've talked about the importance of role play and carryover, giving frequent feedback, mentioned the special activities as well, and the seminars. We also receive parent satisfaction and child satisfaction and staff satisfaction. Fortunately, it's been very positive year after year. We also have doctoral students sometimes that are conducting dissertations on the evidence-based strategies incorporated in the program, and we'll do program evaluations. So we certainly appreciate that. Have up here feedback that a parent had provided, initiated sharing this, as she said, that thanks for making the program available. In the past few weeks, I've seen the metamorphosis of an outcast, sad, frustrated little boy to a happy, fun-loving, cooperative little boy. Brings tears to my eyes how happy he is coming home from the program each day. He doesn't want to miss a minute. He rushes to get ready in the mornings and tells us about it all night or at night. He feels included and important. And it pains me I can't get this kind of peer interaction coaching for him year round. He has a fantastic psychologist that sees him weekly, and his father and I do what I can, but it's not nearly the same as what you provided. So while it's wonderful to hear that feedback, it's also disheartening to hear that many families do struggle with being able to see greater and greater gains. And I know, being in many, many schools, there are wonderful things happening in schools, and sometimes it's the generalization or carryover or the difficulty a parent or family may have to put things in place, or sometimes the child may not be as willing. So social skills programming is challenging, and providing that support likewise is challenging as well, but having a systematic plan and promoting that is really critical. I want to take a few minutes and show a video. I do see that some questions had come up. One of the questions I see is about something in Bergen County. We actually used to have High Step in Fairlawn in Bergen County, and just for a variety of logistical reasons, we moved it down south, further south, relatively speaking, from Bergen County to Scotch Plains. We're always open to opening in another location. So, the individual that reached out to me via that question, feel free to reach out to me following the workshop. So we're open to considering that in future years, whether it's other places in the state, down south or east, west, or further north. So I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to show the video, which takes about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'm also happy to entertain other questions that may come up through the chat. So for those of you that missed the very beginning, I can extend and stay a little bit longer than 1 o'clock. I'll plan to stay on up until 1:15 if there still are some questions coming through the chat. So without further ado, we're going to play the video.
So I learned about power solving.
I talk it out loud or I do it in my brain. You get stars by power solving.
Yeah, we got a couple in the hallway.
I have 6.
Right now, I think I have 1 so far.
I got 7.
Whoever's got the most gets them like a little treat.
I love getting power solving stars.
Put it into words. O is observe your feeling. W is work out your goal. E is to explore and evaluate solutions. And R is to reward yourself.
It works by having them learn how to use what we call power solving. So it's a very handy tool that kids have learned that they can use, and it's very user-friendly and they have an attraction to it, getting in touch with their power. What was your goal?
To get back in line.
Awesome. Your goal is to get back in line. And did you want to get back in line and get in trouble, or get back in line and not get in trouble?
Get back in line and not get in trouble.
Well, we took a look at the typical social skills programs. We felt that it didn't really capture the myriad of problems that kids would face. So rather than focusing on discrete skills, Mike Selbst, my colleague, and I came up with the idea that we wanted to teach kids how to become better problem solvers.
High Step began in year 2000. It was started as a result of parents and school districts seeking an opportunity for students to improve upon social skills during the summer and to promote generalization of social skills throughout the school year, not just in the school, but in the community and in the home. Power solving as a social skills intervention has materials for children and adolescents, approximately kindergarten through 12th grade. And there are materials there that include student workbooks as well as facilitator guides. The materials are very user-friendly with lots of visuals, direct prompts for staff to use with children, parent handouts for promoting generalization and reinforcement of skills, self-monitoring checklists for the children, and there are also rating scales that can provide a pre- and post-rating assessment of the child's progress.
High Step was a wonderful experience for him. At first, some of his extended school year programs that he was having, he just wasn't getting what he needed to advance and to deal with his autism. staff is just amazing, what they put into the kids and how they help them and the time they put into it, and they never, ever give up on a kid.
During the day at High Step, all of the students have individual scorecards, and counselors are giving them feedback throughout the day after each activity on how well they're participating in the activity, and then on 2 individual goals that we've established.
Being able to see from day one when we meet the kids to the last day, the progress that they make in their social skills is amazing, especially when we see some kids that come back year after year. Seeing the progress is great. We have a phenomenally talented staff. All of our staff members, a lot of them work in schools during the years. They're all in the field, and they're all really doing it because they're dedicated and they care about the kids.
I like the data log. I like to keep track of everything. So we get sheets daily. We have a report. We know what his day was, how did he achieve his goals for that day, and also where were the problems? Where did he have issues? And since we get daily reports, I can log that. I keep it in a file. I have it in a book now from last year and now into the second year. So we can go back and we can look.
First grade, before he went to High Step, he had a horrible year. Going into second grade after his first year of High Step, it was an amazing year. Everybody had said, what meds have you put him on? Different things. And we're like, no, we haven't done anything different except he went to this program, and it's been wonderful.
We take tremendous sense of accomplishment, joy, satisfaction when we see children applying these skills independently.
So at the end of the 5 weeks, it's hard to say goodbye. Tears and emotions on both ends. But and the kids will say, can't we go on for one more week? Can this happen when the school starts? Can't High Step last forever? So it's been wonderful.
As a mom, you want your child to be happy. Eric was happy. I mean, he loved going there. When your child is young and you have a child on the spectrum, you don't realize all the options out there. So, that's what I would try to tell anyone at the beginning of their journey, that there are options.
So I appreciate there were some questions that came through, and feel free to continue to ask questions. And for those of you that can continue to stay on the webinar, I'm happy to stay on until 1:15 if there are still questions. And if you're not able to, then either way, I really appreciate your participation, and you can certainly feel free to reach out to me with any individual questions you have, and all of our contact information was through the webinar, which we'll get you a copy of, as well as you can go through our website to get my contact information. So a couple of the questions that I picked up on, asking about the goals and whether the goals are individualized to each student or all students working on the same goals. It's probably a combination of yes to both of those points, meaning that we have some core goals for all the students, which are social problem solving. So specifically, what I mean by that is we're working on power solving every day, as we described. We're working on conversation skills. We're working on anger management. We're working on self-regulation. We're working on ability to understand and communicate feelings, and play skills, play interaction skills, tolerating when things are difficult. So all of the students are working on those skills throughout the course of the summer. In addition, every day, each student has individualized goals that we have come to, as I had mentioned before, as a result of pre-conference with the parent, information the parent is completing on the questionnaires and screening, information from the school where the school district has referred the child. And again, if the school hasn't referred the child and there's an IEP or a 504 plan, we can pull information from there. So we're communicating with the parents what our thoughts are and what their thoughts are about targeted goals. But for sure, when a child is coming from a school district and being referred by the district, we're looking at the IEP goals and objectives that relate to social emotional learning, conversation, behavioral management, communication, feelings regulation, problem solving, friendship making, and really ensuring that we're targeting those specific skills even more directly than what we do as an entire group. So that's why I say it's a combination of that. Additionally, somebody was asking about 17-year-olds, how many 17-year-olds are in the program. Historically, we've always had adolescents in that age range of 16, 17, 18 years of age. Here we are in the beginning of March. We tend to get our highest number of referrals to our program during March and April, to a little lesser extent in May, but it varies, and we certainly get referrals in June as well. So I don't have the numbers at my fingertips of how many kids currently are enrolled or applied that are age 17. But again, I can tell you that historically we have always had individuals in that age range at each of our 3 locations. And that's something that's kind of fluid. It's same thing when somebody's asking about on the other side, a younger child who might be 6 or 7, and how many kids are in that age group. So we can talk that through and communicate pretty transparently with parents. That same kind of question often comes up with the number of girls. For those of you who are familiar with a population of individuals that have social skills weaknesses, we see for those that have diagnoses of ADHD or autism spectrum or other kinds of similar kinds of difficulties, that there are a lot more boys than girls. In many of those diagnoses, it could be 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 boys to girls. We always have girls in our program. How many girls and in what age range? That varies each year. So again, that's something, if you're interested in referring a female student, or if it's your child and wanted to talk that through with us, then we can certainly process that with you and review that as well. Since I still see some people that are hanging on, which is great. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the current best practices in social skills and link that with what we do in our program. And if I see some more questions that pop up, I'll be happy to share that. Additionally, I want to mention that we have 3 seminars, and some of these things I forgot to say earlier. Well, we do have 3 live seminars that are coming up over the course of March and April, and that information is on our website, and our directors of the 3 respective locations will be leading those live seminars in north, central, and southern part of the state. We also are offering a $250 discount to our High Step program if paid in full by the end of March. So it's $250 off. And I believe I mentioned in the beginning also, for those of you that were on this webinar, I'll be sending out a certificate indicating your participation in the webinar today. So I'll be sure to make sure I get that out to you. One of the things I want to talk a little bit more about is video modeling. I mentioned that earlier, and video modeling is really great, not just for social skills, but the evidence is there for increasing daily living skills, academic skills, and behavioral management. So that's pretty easy to do. So if you're an educator or a parent, we see a lot of research support if it's an adult who's demonstrating that and who's been videotaped, just like if it was a child. So there's a slight difference. We call it video modeling when someone is watching somebody else, and video self-modeling when they're watching themselves. So there's real merit and benefit in both areas, that if you can create a video on a specific skill, it could be brushing teeth or playing appropriately, handling winning, handling losing, getting a poor test grade back. If you can demonstrate what that looks like, and it could only be 60 seconds, 30 seconds would be great. Prime the child with review of what those steps are, have that video that we're taking, and have the child view that. If somebody else can take it with you and the child in it, wonderful. If we can have the child being taped, I find that many kids really step up to the plate, and they like the idea of we're making a movie and you're going to be the star of the movie, and let's show what it looks like, and let's practice that desired skill. It often increases their motivation and their participation to display the desired skill. And for those kids, we might prime them right in the morning when they come into our program, or in a school situation, priming them in the morning. The caveat, of course, is you want to make sure you've got permission, consent from the parent to make that video and to have them participate, and anybody else that perhaps would be in that video as well. I see a question that came up about credentials that the lead counselors have. So the credentials vary a little bit in terms of which location, meaning that we don't always have the same sort of position per se in each of the locations, but commonly our lead counselors, that is, if you think about a class which has up to 16 children, and we have a lead counselor, someone who's in charge of that classroom, who's working under the assistant director and under the director of the program. The lead counselor commonly is someone that is an experienced teacher or an experienced special education teacher, or it could be someone that's a social worker, counselor, psychologist, or someone that's pursuing an advanced degree in any of those fields and has experience in social skills. So we don't ever employ high school students, and we don't employ staff that don't have experience and training. So while we provide those 2 days of training, and every day we're providing continual training, almost like a college course would be, even to experienced staff, we ensure that the staff that are in each of those roles have expertise. And lead counselors, again, typically are staff that are already working in a field, have experience, and are demonstrating that they provide that social skills training. And many of those are prior high step staff members, although that's not always the case, because sometimes our staff are going on and moving somewhere else, or have a full-time employment during the summer and they can't continue with us. But again, we require that they need to have that experience and that training, and then we're going to build from there, versus bringing in individuals that don't have any of that that experience or expertise. Just to talk about a couple other things, unless some other questions come in. Some of the questions that we get, not just from regarding our program, but utilization of social skills curriculum, is, well, how can my child handle that if they are not really good with reading or writing? So we make accommodations or modifications where and when there's some reading or some writing that's necessary. That could mean our staff member is writing it for them. It could be another child is writing it, or we're dotting it out and they need to trace it, what we've written. But the kids are not writing essays. They're not writing lots of sentences. There may be a short answer of what their feeling word was, or they're copying from the board the stem that we have so that they can have that information. We're not concerned with spelling. We're not concerned with grammar. We're really more concerned with understanding through that interactive process and practicing the skills necessary to increase their social skills. So I see a question, I'm not completely clear on it, but it says, they all adhere to your procedures, which I see are significantly based on ABA. So maybe I'll just respond a little bit about that. Sometimes there's some confusion people have about, we use the term ABA, which is applied behavior analysis. And really at its core, ABA refers to using evidence-based practices. Some people will think that ABA means that we're sitting across the table from someone, often a learner who has a greater impairment, who we're going to repeatedly do something over and over and over and over again. Well, that could be one type of intervention, more mass trials or discrete trial under ABA. That's not what we do in our program. We utilize ABA principles, meaning that we utilize research-driven, research-based strategies, and we have a systematic plan. Would the kids always look at it and say, hey, there's a plan when they're engaged in a sports activity or interactive learning where they're exploring places that they want to travel, and they're coming up with a poster, and they're going to explain to others about what it means to travel to Australia, and they're making a little passport and pretending to travel, and maybe making foods related to that quote unquote country? I'm not sure the kids would think of that as ABA, but we as staff have a plan in place of what skills we're targeting, how we're going to target that, how we're going to monitor progress, how we're going to deliver feedback to the kids and kind of guide them along. And we want the kids to experience that they're learning while having fun, because if they see that as too regimented, too structured, too much adult driven, then they're going to lose that experience of enjoyment and not be as engaged in that. So yes, our process, our programming is based upon good behavioral principles, and that does fall under the umbrella of ABA, but I would describe it as using best practices that are in the field that research would drive us and say would result in the most success. So I don't know if there's any other questions that I may have missed, but if there were any questions that I didn't answer or that you had not thought of, please do feel free to email me, and I would certainly be very happy to respond to that. We also are very happy to get on the phone with parents or educators, mental health professionals that have questions regarding social skills programming, best practices, questions about how to support students in schools and provide support and training where necessary, whether that's us or giving you guys some strategies. And if you have some questions specifically regarding High Steps, so just reach out to us, and if an email is sufficient, wonderful. If you want to get on the phone with myself or one of our directors, then we can do our best to do that as well. But again, I want to thank everybody for hanging on. We still have a fair number of people that stayed with us until 1:15. If you experience some difficulties with getting on, I apologize, as my assistant, Brian, I think had sent the message out. So while we've done webinars a number of times before, this is the first one that we really hosted ourselves from start to finish. So I'm sorry if it's had some of the kinks to get out, but in terms of, I guess, to put under the umbrella of power solving, we'll problem solve to hopefully have that even more seamless for everybody for our next webinar. So we look forward to continuing to do this on a number of different topics, not just related to programs we're doing, but to be able to share our knowledge and to be able to get information and feedback from all of you. So I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day, and thanks very much for your participation. All right, take care.